Welcome back to the Archive Network. Aurelius here, with Malik, curators of the Conflict Archive. We left Mongol Conquests last time out by the late 1220s. The Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific to the Caspian. Today we pick up where we left off. The Mongol juggernaut rolled on, unstoppable. Imagine looking out from your city walls and seeing a cloud of dust on the horizon, knowing it meant death was coming. There was no escape from that fate. For the Mongols, the grasslands of home faded as they crossed into foreign lands, leaving behind a world that no longer mattered.
But Aurelius, you have to see that perspective misses the deep fear and suffering of the people in those cities. It wasn't just a military advance. It was a human catastrophe. Whole communities were uprooted and destroyed. The grasslands might have faded for the Mongols, but entire civilizations were being erased in the process. Every conquest tells a story of loss, filled with broken families and shattered lives. We can't ignore that. It matters just as much as the strategy.
You're absolutely right about the devastation. The Khwarezmian campaign was nothing short of annihilation. At Merv, the city's fall was brutal and unforgiving. The Mongols didn't discriminate. They herded everyone into the open, children, elders, the whole population. The cries of the doomed echoed for miles, a haunting reminder of what conquest truly means. We often forget that in the pursuit of power, it's the innocent who pay the highest price. This is the dark legacy that lingers long after the dust settles.
Merv was a massacre, yes, but it was also a failure of humanity. Those cries of the doomed were not mere echoes. They were lives snuffed out. When you talk about hundreds of thousands dying, those are families torn apart, not just numbers on a page. The Mongols wielded fear like a weapon, but at what cost?
And yet, that cost didn't seem to deter them. At Nishapur, the response to the death of a beloved commander was even more savage than we might expect. Retribution came quickly and without mercy. The Khan's daughter-in-law, driven by rage, ordered a massacre so complete that not even the animals were spared. It was a chilling display of power, a stark reminder of how fear can shape loyalty. This is the brutal reality of ambition in the world of empires.
Power, yes, but also a cycle of violence that breeds more violence. The survivors of Nishapur were left wandering in a haze, their world reduced to ash. This wasn't just conquest. It was a legacy of horror that would haunt the region for generations. The Mongols might have been victorious, but they sowed seeds of rebellion.
And as we advanced west, we encountered a series of new challenges that would test our resolve. A clever detachment under Subutai and Jebe devised a plan that lured the Russian princes into a trap at the Kalka River. The battlefield was a muddy plain, soaked with relentless rain, a brutal environment for any armored knight. Yet, in this chaos, the Mongol tactics emerged once more, showcasing their deadly effectiveness. It's a stark reminder of how adaptability can turn the tide in warfare.
Effective, yes. But it was also a display of cunning that came at a terrible price. Russian knights, weighed down by armor, found themselves bogged down in the muck. They were easy targets for the Mongol arrows. It wasn't just a battle. It was a slaughter, a lesson in the cost of underestimating an enemy.
True, but the Mongols adapted quickly. They learned from every engagement, dissecting their failures and triumphs alike. By the time they besieged Zhongdu, they had become masters of siege warfare. Captured Chinese engineers played a crucial role, helping to innovate their tactics, designing catapults and trebuchets that could topple walls that had stood for generations. In warfare, evolution is survival. We see this time and again throughout history. Those who can't adapt, they simply fade away.
But what about the human cost of this evolution? The siege of Zhongdu wasn't just a military event. It led to chaos and starvation for countless families. There were reports of cannibalism as desperation set in. When the Mongols finally broke through, treasures that took generations to gather simply vanished overnight. For those who survived the onslaught, the price of survival was steep and horrifying, leaving scars that would last long after the dust settled.
That's the paradox of conquest. The Mongols wielded terror like a weapon, sparing a few to spread their chilling tales. But fear isn't always a reliable tool. Rebellions erupted, forcing the Mongols to return with brutal reprisals. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out, serving as stark reminders of what happens when you defy authority. This cycle of violence and rebellion is a grim lesson in how empires often underestimate the spirit of those they seek to dominate.
And yet, even the Mongols faced fierce resistance. Jalal ad-Din, a determined leader, launched surprise ambushes from the rugged mountains, showing that even the mightiest can be brought to their knees. The steep terrain slowed their cavalry, and disease swept through their ranks like wildfire, leaving them vulnerable and desperate. It wasn't just a campaign. It was a brutal struggle for survival, with lives lost on both sides, each battle echoing the human cost of this relentless conflict.
By the late 1220s, the Mongol Empire had reached its zenith, a moment that's both impressive and tragic. Villages emptied overnight, leaving desolate landscapes, and famine swept in behind the armies like a shadow. Even the Mongol warriors, fierce in their glory, found themselves mourning the losses that came with their victories. They were caught in a relentless cycle of conquest and sorrow, as the empire stood grand and imposing, yet uncertain of its future. The weight of such power is never light.
That's where we leave it this time. Mongol Conquests continues. The story isn't finished yet. Find the full series on the Conflict Archive, part of the Archive Network. We'll be back with the next chapter.